Part 1. The Mockery. The stars looked different from the bridge of the ESS Defiant. Captain Jake Murphy stood with his hands behind his back, watching the endless black of space through the main viewport. He had been a fighter pilot for 15 years before they gave him this ship. Now he commanded humanity's first true deep space vessel, though calling it impressive would be generous. The Defiant was built from salvaged parts, mining equipment, and hope. The communication system beeped. Lieutenant Amy Parker turned from her station, her face pale. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission." "It's not from Earth." Jake felt his heart skip. This was it. First contact. Humanity had been alone in the universe for so long, and now someone had finally found them. "Put it through," he said. The main screen flickered to life. The creature that appeared made several crew members gasp. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, with dark purple skin covered in geometric patterns that seemed to glow. Its eyes were solid black without any visible pupils. When it spoke, the words came through perfectly translated, cold and sharp. "I am Emissary Kralvex of the Zeltharian Empire. Your species has been discovered. You will submit to Imperial authority within 10 solar cycles. Resistance will result in complete annihilation. This is your only warning." Jake stepped forward. "This is Captain Jake Murphy of Earth's United Defense Fleet. We're willing to discuss peaceful contact, but we won't submit to threats." The alien's face twisted into what might have been a smile. "You misunderstand, Primitive. This is not a negotiation. Your species barely controls one star system. You have no shields worth mentioning. Your weapons are chemical propulsion and basic kinetics. You are children playing with fire." The emissary paused. "We have conquered 200 worlds. Your resistance would be amusing if it were not so pointless." The transmission ended. Amy looked at Jake, her voice shaking slightly. "Captain, sensors are picking up multiple contacts. A lot of contacts." The tactical display lit up like a Christmas tree. 300 ships appeared at the edge of the solar system, each one massive. The smallest was twice the size of Earth's largest space station. They held perfect formation, a show of military discipline that made Earth's scattered fleet look like toys. "Get me Admiral Foster," Jake said quietly. "Now." Back on Earth, deep beneath the city of Geneva, the United Defense Command Center erupted into controlled chaos. Admiral Greg Foster stood at the center of it all, a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been a Navy admiral before the space program. Now he commanded every military asset humanity had in space, all 12 ships. President Linda Hayes entered the command center surrounded by security. She was young for a president, only 43, but the last few years had aged her. Building Earth's space defense had taken every resource the planet could spare. "Tell me this is a drill," she said. "I wish it was, Madam President," Greg replied. He gestured to the massive display showing the alien fleet. 300 confirmed vessels, each one showing power readings that dwarf our largest reactors. "They've given us 10 days to surrender. Can we fight them?" Linda asked. Greg looked at her for a long moment. "With what? Our ships have basic armor, primitive missiles, and railguns that were designed for mining asteroids. They have energy shields and plasma weapons. It would be like bringing a knife to a nuclear war." Commander Steve Richards pushed through the crowd. He was younger than Greg, a former Marine who had commanded the defense of Mars Colony. "Admiral, we need to do something. We can't just roll over." "I didn't say we would," Greg replied. He turned to the communication officer. "Get me every ship commander we have. And find Dr. Helen Cruz. I need her here immediately." Dr. Helen Cruz arrived within the hour. She was a physicist, one of the brightest minds on Earth. She had designed most of the Defiant systems, including the experimental railguns. She studied the sensor data from the alien fleet with intense focus. "Their power signatures are fascinating," she murmured. "Everything runs on energy. Their shields, their weapons, even their hull integrity seems to be reinforced by energy fields. Can we beat them?" Linda asked directly. Helen looked up. "Their technology is centuries ahead of ours, maybe thousands of years. But they're arrogant. Look at their formation. They're not even trying to hide. They don't consider us a threat at all." "Are they right?" Steve asked. Helen smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Maybe, but arrogance is a weakness. They've built their entire military around energy warfare, shields that disperse plasma and lasers, point defense systems designed to shoot down missiles with energy signatures." She pulled up a detailed scan of one of their ships. "But look at this. Their actual hull plating is thin. They rely completely on their shields for defense. Greg leaned forward. What are you thinking? I'm thinking they've never fought anyone like us, Helen said. We don't use energy weapons. We use kinetic weapons, simple mass and velocity. Our railguns fire solid projectiles at incredible speeds. No energy signature to track until it's too late. But their shields, Steve began, are designed to disperse energy. Helen interrupted. Not stop physical mass. A shield that can turn aside a plasma bolt might not do anything against a solid tungsten rod, moving at a fraction of light speed. The room fell silent as everyone processed this. Finally, Linda spoke. You're saying we might actually have a chance? A small one, Helen admitted. We'd need to hit them hard and fast, use tactics they don't expect, and we'd need to be willing to take heavy losses. Greg pulled up a tactical map. We have 12 ships. They have 300. Even if your theory works, the math is against us. The math has always been against humanity, Steve said. We're good at beating bad odds. Over the next 10 days, Earth transformed. Every resource went toward preparing for war. Factories that had been building civilian spacecraft switched to military production. Miners who had been working the asteroid belt were recalled and trained as pilots. Scientists worked around the clock developing new weapons. Helen's team built hundreds of new railgun projectiles. Each one was simple, just a tungsten rod with a guidance system barely more complex than what guided missiles used a century ago. But they were fast and they were heavy. Jake trained his crew relentlessly. Amy learned to track targets while the ship was pulling evasive maneuvers that would make a normal person black out. The engineering team stripped everything non-essential from the ship. Comfortable quarters were replaced with ammunition storage. The nice cafeteria became an armory. Every kilogram they could save meant more ammunition they could carry. The Zaltharian fleet waited at the edge of the solar system, broadcasting messages of Earth's impending doom. Admiral Vector commanded the fleet from his flagship, a vessel so large it could be seen from Earth with a telescope. He watched the human world with amusement. They're actually preparing to fight, his second officer reported. 12 vessels moving into defensive positions around their home world. Vector laughed. Admirable in a pathetic way, like insects standing up to a boot. He turned to his tactical officer. When the deadline expires, we'll destroy half their fleet as a demonstration. Then we'll see if they still want to resist. Should we raise our shields, Admiral? The tactical officer asked. Vector waved dismissively. Against what? Their primitive chemical rockets? Save the power. We'll need it to destroy their cities once they refuse to surrender. On the last day, Jake stood on the bridge of the Defiant. His ship was loaded with ammunition, every magazine full, every launcher ready. Around him, 11 other human vessels waited in formation. It wasn't much of a fleet, but it was everything humanity had. All ships report ready, Amy said softly. Jake nodded. He opened a channel to the entire fleet. This is Captain Murphy. In a few hours, we're going to fight an enemy that thinks we're beneath them. They think our weapons are primitive. They think we'll break and run. They're wrong. We're going to show them what humans can do when we're pushed to the edge. We're going to make them regret ever finding Earth. He paused, looking at each face on his bridge. We might not all make it back. But win or lose, they're going to remember us. They're going to remember that humanity doesn't surrender. Earth doesn't yield. Are you with me? The response came from every ship, every crew member, a roar of defiance that echoed across the fleet's communication channels. The countdown reached 0. The Zaltharian fleet began to move, confident in their power, their technology, their inevitable victory. They had no idea what was coming. Part 2. The human solution doctor Helen Cruz had not slept in 3 days. The research facility in Nevada buzzed with activity at all hours. Scientists ran between workstations, engineers tested prototypes, and everyone knew they were racing against extinction. Helen stood in front of a massive display showing the mathematical models of Zaltharian shield technology. The problem is energy, she explained to her team. Their shields are designed to absorb and disperse energy-based attacks. Plasma, lasers, particle beams. They've been fighting wars with these weapons for thousands of years. She pulled up another model. But kinetic weapons are different. Mass and velocity.
Simple physics.
When something solid hits their shields at high speed, the shield doesn't know what to do with it. A younger scientist named Pete raised his hand. But Dr. Cruz, won't the shield still provide some protection? Some, yes, Helen admitted. But not enough. We've calculated that a tungsten projectile moving at 30% of light speed carries enough kinetic energy to punch through their shields before they can fully react. The shield tries to push against the solid mass, but by the time it builds up enough force, the projectile is already through. She walked to a prototype railgun mounted on a test stand. It was larger than the ones currently on the Defiant, more powerful. This is our answer. Magnetic acceleration. We take a solid rod of tungsten, one of the densest metals we have, and we throw it at them so fast that their technology becomes irrelevant. Admiral Greg Foster arrived at the facility late that night. He found Helen in the fabrication bay, watching as massive machines carved tungsten projectiles from raw metal. Each one was 3 meters long and weighed several tons. They looked crude compared to the sleek missiles humanity had used for decades. Will they work? Greg asked quietly. Helen turned to him. On paper, yes. In practice, we won't know until we try. But Admiral, this is about more than just the weapons. The Zaltharians fight a certain way. They've conquered 200 worlds, and I guarantee they won the same way every time. Overwhelming force, superior technology. They show up, demonstrate their power, and the enemy surrenders. But we're not going to surrender, Greg said. No, Helen agreed. And that's going to confuse them. They expect us to fight like they do. Shields, energy weapons, careful tactical formations. When we hit them with kinetic weapons from unpredictable angles, they're going to panic. Not immediately, but once they realize their superiority isn't working. Meanwhile, at the Mars training facility, Captain Jake Murphy pushed his pilots harder than they had ever been pushed. Lieutenant Amy Parker flew through an obstacle course at speeds that would have gotten her court-martialed in peacetime. The converted mining ships they would fly were fast and maneuverable, but they had almost no armor and certainly no shields. You have to be unpredictable, Jake explained to the assembled pilots. The Zaltharians have tactical computers that can predict enemy movements. They've analyzed thousands of battles. They know every standard military maneuver ever developed. He pulled up a holographic display. So we're not going to fly like military pilots. We're going to fly like racing pilots, stunt pilots, like crazy people. Random course changes, sudden accelerations, anything to throw off their targeting computers. Major Chris Bennett, a former Marine pilot, raised his hand. Captain, won't that make it harder for us to aim? Yes, Jake admitted. But if we fly in straight lines, we'll be dead before we get close enough to shoot. I'd rather miss a few shots than make it easy for them to kill us. He switched the display to show footage of the Zaltharian fleet. They fight in formation. Perfect discipline. Every ship in exactly the right position. It makes them strong, but it also makes them predictable. If we break their formation, they'll have to adapt. And adaptation takes time. Time we can use to kill them. Commander Steve Richards worked with the engineering teams modifying Earth's warships. The ESS Valor, his ship, had been a heavy cargo hauler before the war. Now it was being transformed into something else entirely. They ripped out the cargo bays and filled them with ammunition. They removed the comfortable crew quarters and installed more railguns. They stripped away everything that wasn't essential for fighting and dying. Sir, we're reducing the crew quarters to basic bunks, an engineer reported. Life support is minimal. If we lose pressure in one section, we won't be able to seal it off properly. Steve nodded. If we lose pressure, we're probably already dead. Keep stripping. Every kilogram we save is another round we can fire. He walked through the ship, seeing his crew preparing for battle. They were young, most of them. They had joined the space program thinking they would explore, discover, build new colonies. Instead, they were being asked to fight and die against an enemy that had never lost a war. Do you think we can win, Commander? A young technician asked. Steve looked at her. Honestly, I don't know. But I know we can make them bleed, and sometimes that's enough. President Linda Hayes addressed the world 1 week before the deadline. The speech was broadcast to every nation, every city, every person on Earth. She stood in the Oval Office, looking directly into the camera. We face an enemy that considers us primitive, she said. They look at our technology and see something inferior. They look at our weapons and laugh. They have given us a choice, surrender or die. She paused. Earth chooses neither. We will fight, not because we're certain of victory, but because surrender means the end of everything we are. Our independence, our freedom, our future, she continued. I won't lie to you. Many of our defenders will not come home. Our fleet is small and the enemy is vast, but humanity has always been good at beating impossible odds. We put people on the moon with computers less powerful than a modern phone. We split the atom with technology that would be considered primitive today. We have never been the strongest or the most advanced, but we have always been the most stubborn. Around the world, people watched. Some cried, some prayed, some simply held their families close and hoped. In the shipyards above Earth, the final preparations were made. Ammunition was loaded. Systems were tested. Crews said goodbye to their families, knowing it might be the last time. The 12 ships of Earth's fleet prepared to face 300 alien warships. Dr. Helen Cruz came aboard the Defiant to check the railgun systems personally. She found Jake on the bridge staring at the tactical display. "Are you ready?" she asked. Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. "No, but I don't think anyone could be ready for this." He turned to her. "Doctor, tell me honestly, what are our chances?" Helen considered lying, then decided he deserved the truth. 10%. Maybe less. Everything has to go perfectly. Our weapons have to work as designed. The Zaltharians have to react the way we predict. We have to be lucky. She smiled slightly. But I've learned something about humanity. We're very good at being lucky when we need to be. The deadline approached. The Zaltharian fleet moved closer to Earth, their formation perfect, their weapons ready. Admiral Vectar sat on his command throne, confident in his inevitable victory. He had destroyed civilizations far more advanced than these humans. This battle would be over in minutes. On Earth's ships, crews made final checks. Pilots climbed into their cockpits. Engineers confirmed the railguns were functioning at maximum efficiency. Every person knew their job. Every person understood what was at stake. Jake stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching the alien fleet approach. Amy stood at her station, hands steady on the controls. The weapons officer waited for the order to fire. The engineer monitored the power levels. "All ships report ready," Amy said quietly. Jake took a deep breath. Humanity had built 12 ships with whatever they could find. They had loaded them with simple tungsten rods and magnetic accelerators. They were about to challenge the greatest military force in the known galaxy. "Admiral Foster," Jake said over the command channel, "Defiant is ready." "All ships, this is Admiral Foster," came the reply. "We're not going to win by being careful. We're going to win by being bold. Hit them hard. Hit them fast. Make them regret ever finding Earth." A pause. "May God have mercy on their souls because we won't." The order came. "All ships engage." The human fleet accelerated toward the enemy, every engine burning at maximum. They were outnumbered 25-1. Their weapons were considered primitive. Their defenses were almost non-existent. But they were human, and humans had been beating impossible odds since they first climbed down from the trees. The Zaltharians were about to learn what that meant. Part 3. First Blood. Admiral Vectar watched the human ships approach with something close to boredom. 12 vessels against his 300. It was not a battle. It was an execution. He did not even order his shields raised to full power. These primitives with their chemical rockets and basic weapons could not possibly harm his fleet. "They're accelerating, Admiral," his tactical officer reported. "Moving at maximum thrust." "Let them come," Vectar replied. "The closer they are, the faster this will end." He turned to his communications officer. "When they're in range, destroy 3 of their ships. Let the others watch. Maybe it will convince them to surrender after all." On the bridge of the ESS Defiant, Captain Jake Murphy counted down the distance. 500,000 kilometers. 400,000. 300,000. The Zaltharian fleet grew larger on the tactical display, an overwhelming wall of ships that blocked out the stars. "Weapons range in 60 seconds, Amy called out. Her voice was steady, but Jake could see her hands gripping the controls tightly. "All ships prepare to fire on my mark," Jake broadcast. "Remember, aim for the big ones first. We need to hurt them before they realize what's happening." The distance closed. The Zaltharians showed no sign of concern. Their formation remained perfect, almost lazy in its confidence. They did not maneuver. They did not raise their shields to maximum. They simply waited for the humans to come into range of their plasma cannons. "Range in 10 seconds, Amy said. 9, 8, 7. Jake watched the countdown. Everything depended on the next few minutes. If Helen's calculations were wrong, if the railguns did not work as designed, the war would be over before it began. 3, 2, 1. "All ships fire," Jake shouted. The ESS Defiant shuddered as its railguns launched their first volley. Magnetic accelerators hurled tungsten projectiles at incredible speeds. No fire, no exhaust, no energy signature. Just solid mass moving at 30% of light speed. The projectiles crossed the distance in seconds. The Zoltharians never saw them coming. Their sensors, designed to detect energy weapons and missiles with active propulsion, registered nothing until impact. The lead Zoltharian dreadnought took 4 direct hits. The tungsten rods punched through its shields like they were not there. The shields flickered, trying to push against the solid mass, but the projectiles were moving too fast. They tore through the hull, through multiple decks, through critical systems. The ship's power core breached. Atmosphere vented into space, direct hit. Amy shouted, "The dreadnought is disabled!" But the Defiant was not the only ship firing. All 12 human vessels unleashed their railguns simultaneously. Hundreds of tungsten projectiles hammered into the Zoltharian formation. Ships that had never been damaged in centuries of warfare suddenly found themselves with gaping holes in their hulls. Admiral Vektar stared at his displays in shock. "What just hit us?" he demanded. "Where did those weapons come from?" "Unknown, Admiral," his tactical officer stammered. "We detected no energy signatures before impact. No missile launches. No targeting systems. The projectiles just appeared on sensors at the moment of impact." Another Zoltharian cruiser exploded as its reactor overloaded. A destroyer listed to one side, venting atmosphere and debris. The perfect formation began to break apart as damaged ships fell out of position. "Return fire," Vektar roared. "Destroy those primitives." The Zoltharian plasma cannons opened up. Brilliant beams of superheated energy lanced toward the human fleet. But the humans were not where the Zoltharians expected them to be. Jake had his pilots performing evasive maneuvers that made no tactical sense, that no military computer would predict. The Defiant rolled hard to starboard, accelerated upward, then cut engines and drifted for 3 seconds before firing thrusters again. A plasma beam missed by less than 100 meters, so close that the ship's hull plating began to glow from the residual heat. "That was too close," Amy muttered. "Exactly close enough," Jake replied. "Keep us moving. Random patterns. Don't let their computers figure us out." Lieutenant Amy Parker led a squadron of converted mining ships through the chaos. These small, fast vessels darted between the massive Zoltharian warships, firing railguns at close range. The aliens tried to track them, but the little ships were too quick, too unpredictable. "Target the damaged vessels," Amy broadcast to her squadron. "Finish what the big ships started." Her targeting computer locked onto a Zoltharian cruiser that was already venting atmosphere. She fired. 3 tungsten rods hammered into the ship's exposed reactor. The cruiser came apart in a ball of white fire. Major Chris Bennett commanded another fighter squadron, and he took his ships directly into the thickest part of the enemy formation. It was suicide, but it was also chaos. The Zoltharians could not fire their heavy weapons without risk of hitting their own ships. "They're panicking," Chris reported. "Their formation is falling apart. They don't know how to respond." Commander Steve Richards pushed the ESS Valor through the battle like a battering ram. His ship was larger than most of the human fleet, heavily armored by Earth standards, though still fragile compared to Zoltharian vessels. He ignored the smaller enemy ships and focused on the big ones. "Target that carrier," he ordered. "Full magazine. Everything we have." The Valor's railguns fired continuously, the magnetic accelerator screaming as they launched projectile after projectile. The Zoltharian carrier's shields held for a few seconds, then collapsed under the sustained barrage. Tungsten rods tore through the hangar bays, destroying hundreds of fighter craft. Secondary explosions rippled through the massive ship. "Carrier is disabled," Steve's tactical officer reported. "She's not moving." "Good," Steve replied. "Find me another target." The battle raged for 15 brutal minutes. The Zoltharians had numbers and technology, but the humans had desperation and weapons the aliens had never encountered. Every second, more railgun fire hammered into the enemy fleet. Ships that had fought for centuries without taking damage suddenly found themselves crippled. Admiral Vektar finally ordered his shields raised to full power across the entire fleet. It was too late for many of his ships, but it slowed the human assault. The tungsten projectile still hit, but now the shields had time to build up resistance. Some rounds were deflected, others were slowed enough that they caused less damage. "Shields are holding," the tactical officer reported. "The human weapons are less effective now." Vektar nodded, but his face was pale. He had lost 12 ships in 15 minutes. 12 ships. The humans had only 12 ships total, and they had destroyed an equal number of his forces. "Focus fire on the largest human vessel," he ordered. "Destroy it." 50 Zaltharian ships turned their weapons on the ESS Valor. Plasma beams converged from multiple directions. Commander Steve Richards saw the attacks coming and knew there was no way to dodge them all. "Brace for impact," he shouted. The plasma beams hit. The Valor's armor melted. Hull breaches appeared across 3 decks. Fires broke out. Emergency alarms screamed. But the ship held together barely. "Damage report," Steve demanded. "Multiple hull breaches. Fire and engineering. Port railgun is destroyed. Casualty reports coming in." The tactical officer looked up. "Sir, we need to withdraw." Steve shook his head. "Not yet. We're still in this fight. Reroute power from life support to the starboard railgun, and get me a firing solution on that flagship." Captain Jake Murphy saw the Valor taking hits and made a decision. "All ships converge on the flagship. We need to take out their command vessel. If we kill the Admiral, maybe the rest will break." The human fleet focused its attack on Admiral Vektar's massive flagship. It was a beautiful ship, covered in intricate markings that represented thousands of years of military tradition. It was also the most heavily defended vessel in the fleet. Rail gunfire hammered against the flagship's shields. The shields held, absorbing and dispersing the kinetic energy, but even they had limits. The sustained barrage began to overwhelm the defensive systems. "Shields at 60%, Vektar's tactical officer reported. 50%, 40. Get us out of here," Vektar shouted. For the first time in his long military career, he felt something unfamiliar: fear. But before the flagship could maneuver away, Commander Steve Richards made his final contribution to the battle. The ESS Valor, damaged and burning, accelerated toward the flagship at maximum thrust. Every remaining railgun fired continuously. The flagship's shields collapsed. Tungsten projectiles tore into the hull. Critical systems failed. The massive ship lost power and began to drift. "Admiral, we need to evacuate," an officer shouted. Vektar stared at the tactical display, watching his fleet, the mightiest armada in the galaxy, being torn apart by 12 primitive vessels. It was impossible. It was humiliating. It was terrifying. "All ships withdraw," he ordered quietly. "Retreat to the outer system. Now." The Zaltharian fleet pulled back, their formation shattered, their confidence broken. They had lost 18 ships destroyed and 40 more damaged. The humans, they had lost 3 vessels. The ESS Valor limped away from the battle, badly hurt but still alive. On Earth, people watched the battle on every screen, every broadcast. When the alien fleet retreated, the planet erupted in celebration. They had done it. They had actually done it. In the command center beneath Geneva, Admiral Greg Foster allowed. Part 4. The Tide Turns. The celebration on Earth lasted 3 days. People danced in the streets. Ships flying overhead were met with cheers. For the first time since the Zaltharians arrived, humanity believed it might actually survive. But in the military command centers, no one was celebrating. Admiral Greg Foster stood in the war room, studying reconnaissance data. The news was worse than he had feared. 500 ships, he said quietly. "They're sending 500 ships, plus support vessels, supply carriers, and what looks like a mobile command station." President Linda Hayes looked at the numbers and felt her hope crumble. "We have 9 combat-capable ships left. The Valor needs months of repairs. Even if we fight perfectly, the math doesn't work." "No, it doesn't," Greg admitted. He turned to Dr. Helen Cruz, who had been working non-stop since the first battle. "Doctor, we need another miracle." Helen looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes from too many nights without sleep. "I've been thinking about that," she said. "The railguns worked because they were unexpected. But now the Zaltharians know about them. They'll adapt their shields, adjust their tactics. We need something new." She pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's solar system. "The Zaltharians are cautious now. They're not going to charge in blind. They'll advance slowly, shields at maximum, watching for our railgun attacks." She zoomed in on the space between Earth and Mars. "So we don't wait for them to come to us. We make the battlefield itself a weapon." "Explain," Greg said. "Mines," Helen replied. "Old-fashioned, primitive nuclear mines. We scatter thousands of them throughout the solar system. No power signatures, no active sensors, just floating there waiting. When a Zaltharian ship comes close, boom." Commander Steve Richards, attending the meeting via video link from the damaged Valor, spoke up. "Doctor, won't their sensors detect the mines?" "Not if we do it right," Helen said. Their sensors are incredibly advanced. They can detect a missile launch from 1,000,000 kilometers away, but that's because missiles have engines, guidance systems, power sources. These mines would be completely passive. Just a nuclear warhead with a simple proximity sensor, the kind of technology we had 100 years ago. Admiral Foster nodded slowly. It could work, but we'd need thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands. Every factory on Earth is already working for the war effort, President Hayes said. If we need mines, we'll build mines. Lieutenant Amy Parker volunteered to lead the mine-laying operation. It was dangerous work, flying through the solar system, placing explosives while Zaltharian scouts watched from the outer system. She commanded a small fleet of cargo ships that had been modified for the mission. "We're not trying to hide what we're doing," she explained to her pilots. "Let them see us. Let them wonder what we're placing out here. It'll make them more cautious, and caution slows them down." For 3 days, the cargo ships flew back and forth, releasing mines at carefully calculated positions. Each mine was simple, almost crude. A nuclear warhead, a proximity sensor, and a basic detonator. No shields, no armor, no self-defense systems. They just floated in space, invisible to advanced sensors, waiting. Captain Jake Murphy used the time to repair the Defiant and train his crew. The first battle had taught them valuable lessons. They knew now that the Zaltharians could adapt, could learn. The second battle would be harder. "They'll have their shields at maximum from the start," Jake told his weapons officer. "That means our railguns will be less effective. We'll need to concentrate fire, multiple ships targeting the same enemy vessel to overload their shields." Major Chris Bennett worked with the remaining fighter pilots. They had lost nearly a third of their number in the first battle. The survivors were experienced now, but also haunted by what they had seen. "I know you're scared," Chris told them. "I'm scared too. But fear keeps you sharp. Fear keeps you alive. Use it." On the Zaltharian flagship, Admiral Vectar studied intelligence reports about the human mine-laying operation. He saw the cargo ships moving through the solar system. He knew they were placing weapons of some kind. But his scans could not detect what those weapons were. "The humans are trying to set a trap," his second officer observed. "Obviously," Vectar replied. "The question is, what kind of trap?" He had been humiliated in the first battle. The Emperor himself had questioned his competence. This time there would be no mistakes. "We advance slowly. Maximum shields, full sensor sweeps. If there are mines, our point defense systems will destroy them." The Zaltharian armada entered Earth's solar system 5 days after the first battle. 500 warships moved in perfect formation, shields blazing with power, every weapon ready. They advanced at 1/4 light speed. Cautious now, respectful of the enemy that had bloodied them. They moved through the outer planets without incident. Past Neptune, past Uranus, past Saturn. Sensors swept continuously, searching for threats. The humans remained silent, their ships holding position near Earth, waiting. The fleet reached the asteroid belt. Admiral Vectar ordered a halt while scouts investigated. "There could be anything hidden in those asteroids," he said. "Weapons platforms, more of their ships. Search everything." It took 6 hours to clear the asteroid belt. By then the Zaltharian fleet had relaxed slightly. Perhaps the humans had no more tricks. Perhaps they were simply waiting to die. The fleet entered the space between Mars and Earth. It was there that the trap was sprung. The first mine detonated when a Zaltharian destroyer passed within 100 meters. The nuclear explosion was enormous, a miniature sun blooming in the darkness. The destroyer's shields absorbed most of the energy, but the blast was close, too close. The ship was thrown off course, shields flickering. Then the second mine detonated. And the third. And the fourth. Within seconds, hundreds of nuclear explosions tore through the Zaltharian formation. Ships that had been advancing in perfect order suddenly found themselves surrounded by fireballs, shields strained under multiple simultaneous impacts. The formation collapsed into chaos. "What's happening?" Admiral Vectar shouted. "Where are these weapons coming from?" "Unknown, Admiral," his tactical officer replied. "We're detecting detonations throughout the fleet. No targeting systems, no propulsion signatures. The weapons are just there and then they explode." 20 Zaltharian ships were destroyed in the first minute. 50 more sustained heavy damage. The fleet tried to maneuver away from the mines, but that only exposed them to more explosions. The mines were everywhere, thousands of them, turning the space between Mars and Earth into a nuclear minefield. "All ships, emergency thrust," Vectar ordered. "Get us through this field." But as the Zaltharians accelerated, trying to escape the mines, They flew directly into the second part of Earth's trap. The human fleet emerged from behind Mars, weapons hot, ready to fight. Captain Jake Murphy saw the Zaltharian formation in disarray and smiled grimly. Now they're off balance. All ships attack pattern Delta. Hit the damaged ones first. The ESS Defiant accelerated toward the enemy. Railguns fired, targeting ships whose shields had been weakened by the mine explosions. The tungsten projectiles found gaps in the defenses, tore into exposed hulls. Lieutenant Amy Parker led her fighter squadron through the chaos, targeting the Zaltharian command ships. They're confused. They don't know which threat to focus on. Press the advantage! Commander Steve Richards brought the partially repaired Valor into the fight. His ship was slower now, damaged but still dangerous. Engineering, give me everything you have. I don't care if the reactor melts down after this battle, I need power now. The Valor's railguns opened fire, concentrating on a single Zaltharian carrier. The carrier's shields held against the first volley and the second, but the third overloaded the defensive systems. Tungsten rods punched through the hull. The carrier exploded spectacularly. Major Chris Bennett took his fighters into the heart of the enemy fleet. It was suicide, but it was also incredibly effective. The Zaltharians could not use their heavy weapons without hitting their own ships. The human fighters darted between the massive vessels, firing at point-blank range, then disappearing before the aliens could respond. The battle raged for 3 hours. The space between Mars and Earth became a graveyard of ships, human and alien alike. More mines detonated as ships maneuvered through the field. Railgun fire hammered against shields. Plasma beams lanced through the darkness. Admiral Vectar tried to restore order to his fleet, but it was impossible. The humans fought with no regard for their own safety. They took terrible losses but inflicted worse. Every time the Zaltharians tried to form up, another mine would detonate or a fighter squadron would appear from an unexpected angle. We've lost 90 ships, the tactical officer reported. His voice shook. 90 ships, Admiral. The Emperor's fleet destroyed by primitives. Vectar stared at his displays, watching another dreadnought explode. The humans were winning. It should have been impossible, but they were winning. They fought with weapons his empire had abandoned thousands of years ago. Simple physics, mass and velocity, nuclear explosions. And it was working. Signal the fleet, he said quietly. All ships retreat to the outer system. We regroup, reassess, and request additional reinforcements. The Zaltharian fleet pulled back, leaving behind the wreckage of 90. Part 5. Dust and Ashes. The Zaltharian Emperor. Zalketh arrived in Earth's solar system personally, bringing with him the full might of the Imperial Armada. Over 1,000 warships jumped into position at the edge of the system, so many that they blocked out the stars. The Emperor's flagship was a vessel of legend, larger than any human city. Covered in gold plating that reflected the light of Sol, Admiral Vectar stood before the Emperor on the bridge of that magnificent ship. He had been stripped of his command after the second battle, reduced to an advisor. The humiliation burned, but not as much as the memory of losing to primitive humans. They fight with weapons we abandoned millennia ago, Vectar explained. Kinetic projectiles. Nuclear explosives. Simple physics. But they use them effectively, and they fight with no regard for their own survival. Emperor Zalketh studied the tactical displays showing Earth and its remaining defenders. 7 human ships, all damaged, holding position around their home world. Then we will show them what true power looks like. Prepare the fleet for total assault. I want every ship, every weapon focused on that planet. We will not leave until Earth is broken. On Earth, Dr. Helen Cruz worked in her laboratory for the final time. She had one last idea, one last desperate gamble. For 3 weeks, every factory on the planet had been producing railgun ammunition. Not hundreds of projectiles. Not thousands. Millions. We're turning the entire planet into a weapons factory, she explained to Admiral Greg Foster. Every available resource goes to making tungsten rods. Simple guidance chips. We load every ship until they can barely move, and then we fire everything at once. How many projectiles are we talking about? Greg asked. Helen pulled up the numbers. If we strip every non-essential system from our remaining ships, we can carry approximately 3 million rounds total. Spread across 7 vessels, that's about 400,000 rounds per ship. Greg whistled softly. That's not a battle plan. That's a swarm. Exactly, Helen agreed. The Zaltharians have superior shields, better weapons, more ships. But shields have a maximum capacity. Defenses can be overwhelmed. If we throw 3 million projectiles at them in a short enough time frame, their systems will collapse. They won't be able to stop all of them. Captain Jake Murphy walked through the Defiant one last time, seeing the changes. The ship was barely recognizable. Every comfortable space had been removed. The crew quarters were now ammunition storage. The mess hall was packed with tungsten rods. The medical bay held guidance chips. They had even removed most of the life support systems from sections they did not absolutely need. "We can sustain the crew for about 6 hours with the reduced life support," his chief engineer reported. "After that, carbon dioxide buildup will start affecting performance." "The battle won't last 6 hours," Jake replied. "One way or another, it'll be over in less than one." Lieutenant Amy Parker prepared her fighter for the final mission. Her little ship was loaded with so much ammunition that it could barely accelerate. She looked at the other pilots, young men and women who had signed up to explore space, not die in it. "Listen up," she told them. "We're probably not going to survive this. The admirals know it. The president knows it. We all know it. But if we're going to die, we're taking as many of them with us as possible. Make every shot count. Make them remember Earth." The pilots nodded silently. Some were scared. Some were angry. All were determined. Major Chris Bennett said goodbye to his family over a video link. His daughter was 8 years old. She did not understand why Daddy was crying. "I love you," he told her. "Always remember that. And remember that Daddy fought to keep you safe." Commander Steve Richards had died aboard the Valor in the last battle, but his replacement, Commander Lisa Grant, prepared her ship with the same determination. The ESS Guardian was Earth's last heavy cruiser. Damaged but functional, she would lead the charge. President Linda Hayes addressed the planet one final time. She stood in the ruins of the Geneva Command Center, which had been damaged in a Zaltharian bombing raid the day before. "Tomorrow, our fleet will face the greatest armada ever assembled," she said. 7 ships against 1,000. The odds are impossible. Victory is unlikely, but surrender is unthinkable. She paused, choosing her words carefully. "If this is humanity's last day, let it be a day the galaxy remembers. Let them tell stories about the species that refused to yield, the species that fought an empire with mining ships and courage." Around the world, people watched and waited. There were no more celebrations. Everyone understood what was coming. The Zaltharian fleet advanced in perfect formation. Emperor Zalketh had ordered a slow, methodical approach. Shields at maximum, all weapons charged. They would take no chances this time. The humans would be crushed under the sheer weight of Imperial power. "Maintain formation," the Emperor ordered. "When we reach optimal range, we fire everything. I want that planet reduced to dust." The human fleet moved out to meet them. 7 small ships against 1,000 massive warships. It looked like a joke. It looked like suicide. Captain Jake Murphy opened a channel to all the human ships. "This is it. Everything we've built, everything we've fought for, comes down to the next hour. We're going to fly directly at them. We're going to get as close as possible, and then we're going to fire every single round we have." He paused. "It's been an honor serving with all of you." The distance closed. 1 million kilometers, 500,000, 200,000. All ships, Admiral Greg Foster broadcast from Earth. "Weapons free. Give them everything." 7 human ships opened fire simultaneously. It was not like the previous battles. It was not careful, aimed shots at specific targets. It was a storm. 3 million tungsten projectiles launched in the span of 30 seconds, filling the space between the 2 fleets with solid metal moving at incredible speeds. The Zaltharians saw it coming and could not believe what they were seeing. Their sensors detected millions of incoming projectiles. It was impossible. No species had that much ammunition. No species was that insane. "Raise shields to maximum," Emperor Zalketh shouted. "Point defense, engage everything." The Zaltharian point defense systems opened fire, trying to shoot down the incoming projectiles. They destroyed hundreds, thousands, but there were millions more. The automated systems overloaded, unable to track so many targets. The shields flickered as projectile after projectile hammered against them. The Emperor's flagship took 300 hits in 10 seconds. The shields held for a moment, straining under the incredible load, then collapsed. Tungsten rods punched through the golden hull plating. One struck the bridge. Emperor Zalketh had a fraction of a second to realize he was dying. Then the projectile tore through him and the command systems behind him. The flagship exploded. All across the Zaltharian fleet, the story repeated. Shields overloaded under the sustained barrage. Hulls that had never been breached were torn open. Ships that had fought for centuries exploded or broke apart. The perfect formation dissolved into chaos as hundreds of vessels lost power, lost control, or simply ceased to exist. Commander Lisa Grant pushed the ESS Guardian forward, firing until the railguns overheated and seized. Then she aimed her ship at a Zaltharian carrier and gave the order. "All hands abandon ship. I'm going in alone." "Commander, you'll die," her first officer protested. "We're all going to die," Lisa replied calmly, "but I'm going to take that carrier with me. Get to the escape pods. That's an order." She waited until the crew evacuated, then pushed the Guardian to maximum thrust. The damaged cruiser accelerated toward the enemy carrier like a missile. The Zaltharians tried to stop her with plasma fire, but their weapons were scattered, desperate. The Guardian took hit after hit but kept coming. Lisa Grant smiled as she triggered the ship's self-destruct. The Guardian's reactor overloaded, and ship and carrier vanished in a flash of nuclear fire. Lieutenant Amy Parker ran out of ammunition after 12 minutes of continuous fire. Her fighter was empty, useless. She looked at the Zaltharian fleet. Still hundreds of ships left despite the devastating assault, and made her decision. "Phoenix Squadron, form on me," she broadcast. "We're going in." 23 fighters, all out of ammunition, all damaged, accelerated toward the enemy fleet. They were too small for the Zaltharians to effectively target with their heavy weapons. They reached the enemy formation, and each pilot chose a target. Amy aimed her fighter at a Zaltharian command ship. Her console showed critical damage warnings. Fire suppression systems had failed. She could smell smoke. It did not matter. Nothing mattered except the target. "For Earth," she whispered, and her fighter struck the command ship at full velocity. The explosion was tiny compared to the massive vessels around it, but it tore through critical systems. The command ship lost power and began to drift. All across the battlefield, human ships made their final attacks. Major Chris Bennett rammed his fighter into a Zaltharian destroyer. Captain Jake Murphy, his ship out of ammunition and critically damaged, aimed the Defiant at the largest enemy vessel he could see. "Amy was right," he said to his remaining crew. "They're not laughing anymore." The Defiant struck home. The battle lasted 47 minutes. When it ended, the space around Earth was filled with debris. Wreckage from over 800 Zaltharian warships drifted in the void. The Emperor was dead.